Well, for some analysis, we can cross over and speak to our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Doug, in the end, these were pretty light measures announced by the government. Is that the right approach?
Well, look, there's no absolute answer to that, and I'd be paid a lot more if I did have a definitive answer. But look, Emmanuel Macron has been nothing if consistent in his sort of attitude and approach to the coronavirus. He said way back when, at the height of the 2020 pandemic, that France is going to have to live with the virus. That this perhaps wasn't something that was going to be definitively tackled and done and dusted and done with. There have been countries, notably China, other countries in Asia, which have had the so-called zero COVID approach, locking entire cities of 12, 13 million down in order to literally annihilate, to pulverize the virus anywhere it may lurk. That has not been the approach here. There's a recognition, perhaps, and it's also recognition brought about by very close consultation over the last weeks and months with epidemiologists, that this coronavirus is going to be lurking around, and that perhaps the best tool against it is what we already have, which makes this a very different scenario than last year. Sure, France has been having about 70,000 daily average cases over the past week, 100,000 alone last Friday. That said, the fact that there are vaccinations now, a strong vaccination campaign, 75% of French have been 2 doses of vaccine. Now you have about 38 million French who've gotten their boosters as well. And that 1-2 punch, the combination of the 2-shot vaccines plus that booster shot, the period for which has now been shortened between the second and third doses, is really what the government is leaning on most heavily. They don't say it's an elixir that is going to cure all the COVID problems. Far from it. They acknowledge that vaccines alone can't solve the problem. But what they do think the vaccines can do, and have proven so far to do, is to reduce the number of people who are getting symptoms from the disease, and to prevent those who do get it, who've been vaccinated, from having serious or grave symptoms. So those who are vaccinated will not have as severe symptoms in most cases. There will be fewer people getting them, and they will be less contagious if they have the vaccines. So that is the approach right now here in France. And there's, yes, a political season here. So, of course, politicians, including Emmanuel Macron, who is all but sure to run again for president in 4 months' time for re-election, they are basically trying to steer clear of anything that smacks of another very difficult hardship period of closures, lockdowns, and curfews. So New Year's Eve, for instance, will go ahead with no curfew in France this year.
And Doug, we have seen a patchwork of strategies across Europe. What are some of the countries where they're not getting off quite so easily?
Well, the Netherlands has been in a lockdown, and it's remaining in a lockdown right now. Denmark is not in a lockdown, but it's had the highest rate of infections, which is a turnaround from how it had been faring earlier in this pandemic. The highest rate of infections, I believe at last count, even in the world relative to its population. There seems to be a slight divide in the progression of the epidemic, whether we're talking about Western Europe, where case numbers of COVID, driven more and more by the new Omicron variant, have been exploding, have been really surging, versus the East. The East part of Europe doesn't mean that the numbers are great or all going down, but they are getting less and less. Across Europe, politicians are trying to take a light approach, but it's not working in all cases. And like I said, Netherlands lockdown's been necessary. England is holding off on any measures until after the new year, if that even happens then. But I'll notice that that's England. Scotland has been taking stricter measures. It has different approaches, and it really is a patchwork approach right now in Europe, though it's fair to say across the continent we have been seeing the same surge almost wherever you look.
All right, Doug, thank you very much for that breakdown of European strategies against the coronavirus. That was our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert.